Pepsi once got paid with Soviet warships. That sounds fake, like one of those internet stories someone makes up for views. But this story is real. Not exactly in the crazy way people repeat it online, but real enough to make you stop and ask one question. How did a soft drink company end up in a deal involving vodka, submarines, and the Soviet Union? This is not just a story about cola. This is America versus Russia, but not with guns, not with bombs, not with tanks. This was a war fought with sugar, bubbles, bottles, and business deals. And somehow, Pepsi walked into the Soviet Union before Coca-Cola could fully win that market. That is the part people don't expect, because when most people think of American cola, they think Coca-Cola first. Coke is the red can. Coke is the classic. Coke is the drink you see everywhere. But in the Soviet Union, Pepsi had a special place. And the story starts in the middle of the Cold War. America and the Soviet Union did not trust each other. Both sides were trying to prove their system was better. America wanted to show the world, look at our freedom, our products, our lifestyle. The Soviet Union wanted to show, look at our power, our science, our discipline. Everything became a competition. Space was a competition. Sports was a competition. Technology was a competition. Even food and drinks became part of the fight. Then, in 1959, there was an American exhibition in Moscow. America wanted to show Soviet people what American life looked like. They showed cars, they showed kitchen appliances, they showed modern homes, and of course, they showed American products. One of those products was Pepsi. At that time, Richard Nixon was not president yet. He was the vice president of the United States, and Nikita Khrushchev was the leader of the Soviet Union. These two men were walking through the exhibition, surrounded by cameras, officials, and people watching every move. Then Pepsi got its moment. Khrushchev was given a cup of Pepsi. Just think about that. The leader of the Soviet Union, one of America's biggest enemies at that time, standing in Moscow drinking an American cola. That photo was powerful. It was not just a man drinking soda, it was a symbol. It was America saying, even your leader likes our drink. That one moment gave Pepsi something money could not easily buy: attention. And not just normal attention, Cold War attention, the kind of attention that makes a product feel bigger than a drink. But tasting Pepsi was one thing. Selling Pepsi inside the Soviet Union was another problem, because the Soviet Union was not like a normal market. You could not just walk in, open a shop, sell bottles, collect money, and go home. There were rules, there were political issues, and there was one very big problem: money. The Soviet ruble was not easy to trade internationally. Pepsi could not simply sell cola in the Soviet Union and take Soviet money back to America like normal dollars. So they needed another way. And this is where the story becomes strange. Instead of paying Pepsi with normal money, the Soviet Union paid with vodka. Yes, vodka. The deal was simple in a weird way. Pepsi would sell cola concentrate to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union would give Pepsi rights to sell Stolichnaya vodka in the United States. So basically, America gave cola, Russia gave vodka. That is one of the most Cold War deals ever. One side brought the bubbles, the other side brought the alcohol. And for a while, it worked. Pepsi became one of the first major American consumer products sold in the Soviet Union. That was huge. Imagine living in a country where American products are rare and suddenly you can buy Pepsi. For many Soviet people, Pepsi was not just a drink. It was a small taste of the outside world, a small taste of America, a small taste of something different. And that made Pepsi special. Coca-Cola may have been the bigger name globally, but Pepsi had the Soviet connection. That gave Pepsi a powerful story. But then the deal started getting complicated. The Soviet Union wanted more Pepsi. Pepsi wanted to keep expanding, but vodka trade was not enough anymore. The business had grown too big. Pepsi needed payment. The Soviets still had trouble paying in normal hard currency. So they looked around and thought, what do we have? And the answer was unbelievable. Ships. Old Soviet ships. This is the part that made the internet lose its mind years later. The Soviet Union made a deal that involved old naval vessels. Reports often say the deal included submarines and other ships, and from there, the legend was born. People started saying Pepsi became one of the biggest navies in the world. Now that sounds amazing. A cola company with submarines? Imagine a Pepsi submarine. Imagine a warship with a Pepsi logo on the side. It sounds like something from a cartoon. But here's the truth. Pepsi wasn't actually sailing around the ocean with warships. They weren't building a cola navy. They weren't fighting Coca-Cola at sea. The ships were old. They were part of a business deal. They were meant to be sold or scrapped. So the story is real, but the meme version is too dramatic. Pepsi did not become a military superpower. But still, the fact that warships were involved in a soft drink deal is crazy enough on its own. Because think about how strange this is. Most companies get paid by bank transfer. Pepsi got paid through vodka and old ships. That's not normal business. That's Cold War business. That's what happens when politics, money, and brands all crash into each other. And this is why the Cola War was never just about taste. People think Coke versus Pepsi is about which one is sweeter, which one has better bubbles, which one tastes better with pizza. But behind the scenes, it was much bigger. Coca-Cola and Pepsi were not just selling drinks, they were selling identity. Coca-Cola was the classic American symbol. Pepsi wanted to be younger, cooler, and different. Coke had history, Pepsi had hunger. Coke was the giant, Pepsi was the challenger. And in the Soviet Union, Pepsi found a place where it could beat Coke in a very unusual way. Pepsi got in early. Pepsi built a relationship. Pepsi became familiar. And that mattered. Because when people grow up seeing a brand, it becomes part of memory. It becomes more than a product. It becomes a feeling. For some Soviet people, Pepsi was connected to something exciting, something foreign, something American, something they could taste even if they could not travel to America. That is powerful marketing, not because of a TV ad, not because of a catchy song, but because the product itself felt like a window. A bottle of Pepsi could feel like a small piece of another world. And that is why this story is so interesting. America and Russia were in a serious political fight, but at the same time, Soviet people were drinking an American cola. That is almost funny. Governments could argue, leaders could threaten each other, the news could talk about danger, but somewhere, someone was opening a Pepsi bottle and drinking it. Food and drinks have a strange power like that. They cross borders in ways politics cannot. A politician may say, "We are enemies," but a person may say, "This tastes good," and taste can be stronger than politics. That is what made Pepsi's move so smart. They did not win by shouting. They won by entering daily life, one bottle at a time, one drink at a time, one small habit at a time. But of course, the Soviet Union did not last forever. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. Everything changed. The old system broke apart. Russia opened more to global brands. Coca-Cola came in stronger. The market changed. The old Pepsi deals became part of history. But the story stayed alive because it's too strange to forget. A soft drink company, a communist superpower, vodka tainments, old submarines, a cola war inside the Cold War. You cannot make that sound normal, and that is why people still talk about it. But here's the bigger lesson. The real winner was not just Pepsi, and it was not just America. The real winner was branding, because Pepsi understood something very important. Sometimes being first in the right place is more powerful than being the biggest name. Coca-Cola was already a legend, but Pepsi found a door into the Soviet Union and walked through it. That gave Pepsi a story Coca-Cola could not easily copy. And stories matter. People remember stories more than facts. You might forget sales numbers, you might forget business dates, but you will remember this. Pepsi once made a deal with the Soviet Union that involved warships. That line alone is stronger than most advertisements, and that is the power of a wild business story. It makes the brand feel bigger. It makes people curious. It makes people share it. It makes people ask, wait, is that actually true? That question is gold, because once people ask that, they keep watching, they keep reading, they keep talking. And now, decades later, we are still talking about Pepsi and Soviet ships. That's insane. So when people say Coke versus Pepsi, they usually think of a taste test. One red can, one blue can. take a sip, pick a winner. But the real Cola War was much deeper. Coke was fighting for the world, Pepsi was fighting for attention. And in the Soviet Union, Pepsi pulled off one of the strangest brand moves in history. It turned a drink into diplomacy. It turned cola into a Cold War symbol. It turned vodka into payment. And then, somehow, it turned old warships into part of a soft drink legend. So who won America versus Russia in the Cola War? If we talk about global power, Coca-Cola still became the bigger worldwide icon. No doubt, Coke is everywhere. Coke is one of the most famous brands on Earth. But if we talk about the craziest story, Pepsi wins. If we talk about shock value, Pepsi wins. If we talk about the most unbelievable business deal, Pepsi wins easily. Because Coca-Cola may have Santa Claus, red trucks, and classic ads, but Pepsi has something much stranger. Pepsi has the story of the Soviet Union paying for cola with vodka and ships. That is not just marketing, that's history. And maybe that's why this story feels so perfect, because it shows how weird the world can be. Two superpowers can be enemies. Their leaders can argue, their armies can prepare, their people can fear war. And still, in the middle of all that, a fizzy drink can sneak through the door. A bottle of Pepsi can end up in Soviet hands. A business deal can become so strange that people still talk about it years later. That is the real Cola War. Not just Coke versus Pepsi, not just America versus Russia. It was politics, business, culture, and taste, all mixed into one bottle. And the wildest part is this: Pepsi didn't need to fire a single shot, it just needed bubbles. Watch the next food battle.